All right, welcome everybody. This is Legal Ask Me Anything. We have attorney Bob Shaker. Bob, welcome to this program here.
Hey, I'm honored to be here, Joe. Thank you.
Here we go. Rookie. Rookie. And so what we're going to do is we're going to dedicate some time. If you would like to call the program, 330-595-1600 if you have any legal questions for Bob. I'm going to pick your brain a little bit, talk a little bit about the profession. You and I having a conversation. So,
that sounds great.
All right, cool. All right, so I'm sure that your business during the COVID stuff has been altered a little bit. Are you guys back to normal court appearances, or has everything been Zoom?
Court appearances are starting to return to pre-pandemic levels. Throughout the last year during the pandemic, we were fortunate insofar as our office work and phone calls and moving our personal injury files has been pretty steady, and we've been able to keep that going. But when you're a trial attorney and there's no trials, there's no courts, it can affect the bottom line. But we were fortunate. We came through it pretty strong.
So what are your specialties? What kind of stuff are you into?
Primarily personal injury, automobile accidents, dog bites, in some circumstances, falls, medical negligence, wrongful death, semi-truck accidents, motorcycle accidents, and then some criminal defense, mostly OVI, DUI defense, and some felony defense, some federal court defense.
So I'm sure you get all kinds of different cases come to your door.
Wide range.
Yeah.
You know, just when you think you've been surprised or shocked, something else comes in that breaks the mold from the last case.
Yeah. So now, let me get the COVID stuff out of the way. Are there any, like it went from an injury standpoint in, year from the future, 2 years in the future, if there's any, fallout from vaccines or anything that has to do with this, what are the immunities like for these, either the governments, the drugstores, or the manufacturers?
Well, insofar as governments goes, there's something out there called sovereign immunity. It goes back to the feudal times. You can't sue the sovereign. You can't sue the king. And that's what we have both on the state, local, and federal level. And with regards to the vaccine, as much government involvement as there been with securing the production, a lot of these companies are going to be shrouded with that government immunity because
Right.
It was a government emergency measure that took that in. However, there's always ways around sovereign immunity. If there's something that rises to the level of almost intentional, extreme recklessness, gross recklessness, somebody that knew maybe a box of vaccine was contaminated with hepatitis or something, and just hit it, let it go, then that would be an extreme example that would get around just mere negligence. It would be probably get around sovereign immunity.
So if it was used the way it should and it was administered the way it should, then you're probably stuck there.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. But I'm sure there's, just like with anything else, anything that's mass produced, even motor vehicles or any kind of pharmacy products, there probably will be some sort of products litigation, not necessarily for injuries, but maybe patent infringements and things. I could see that coming down the road.
What about a company that may have, because of the shutdowns or whatever, went out of business or taken on a boatload of debt or whatever? Are they going to have any kind of claim against the process, or again, same thing?
Wow. The government put forth measures like PPP, for example,
Right.
That allowed a lot of these companies small companies and large companies, to maintain payroll. I mean, there were a lot of emergency funds that just pumped into the economy. So you haven't really heard of a lot of companies just shutting their doors, with the exception of food, entertainment. I think a lot of them, it's going to look a lot different. It's starting to already.
Right.
But in my opinion, based on what I'm seeing, it wasn't perfect, but it did what it was supposed to do insofar as pumping that money into the economy, keeping everything going. I think it's looking back 10 years from now, it'll be looked upon as a wildly successful measure. That's what I think.
Okay. Now, with the way that people, stayed home, didn't go to bars, DUIs probably probably didn't see many of the DUIs in the court system lately.
Without a doubt, especially, what was it, a year ago, March, when everything really shut down. Was it March 13th, 2020, something like that? For 6-8 weeks, I mean, I even looked out my office window. You didn't see cars.
Right.
I mean, I was considered an essential employee as a lawyer. So I would drive in. I spent a lot of time on the interstate and Route 422. No cars. So anything to do with cars, selling gas, personal injury lawyers, auto accident cases down, DUIs, people not getting them, bars not selling liquor. So that first 6-8 weeks before things started to open up semi or partially, it was very quiet.
Zombie apocalypse quiet. It was hot.
It was weird. It was weird. And I remember in 2008, 2009, when the financial calamity hit, it was the same thing. When all of those banks started folding, companies couldn't borrow money, people were getting laid off, nobody was out there. It got real quiet. Phones weren't ringing. And again, that was also a wildly successful economic, I hate to use the word bailout, but that's what it was, brought us back from the brink. It's like a 10-year cycle. Every 10 years, you have to have a calamity. But I wish it didn't happen. Yeah.
Conspiracy theories are going crazy.
Conspiracy. Yeah.
So I got to get. We spent a fair bit of time doing the speed camera, the bridge traps, and all that kind of stuff. And,
yes.
And so that topic comes up more than any other on any of our shows. It gets to people because they feel like they're being, abused by law enforcement in some way. So what are your thoughts on it from your perspective?
On a personal level, I hate it. Okay. I think it's, and to my friends in law enforcement that are funding their municipalities or townships with these revenues. And they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars on a monthly basis, a lot of these communities. No offense, but as a motorist, I can't stand sneak attack.
Yeah.
Right. I like visible police presence. I'm going to slow down. Everybody's going to slow down. But the problem is the public doesn't want to support hiring enough people in law enforcement and paying them accordingly to be out there and to be visible in the right amount of numbers. So I think this is the way communities that can't pass levies or income tax increases, they go to this speed camera to raise that revenue. So I in a sense, I feel for them because they're in a box.
Right. It's not their fault. They need the funding, and
I don't like the entrapment. It's really not entrapment, but I don't like the feel of it. I think people should support more funding for law enforcement, good law enforcement, well-trained officers, and have them visible in our communities, and people will slow down. I mean, that's the best way, in my opinion, in my 35 years as being a lawyer. That's the biggest deterrent to crime, is a visible police presence.
Right.
Speed cameras, not a big fan. And the court, they're not really. I mean, they've been ruled as constitutional since they've changed the statutes in Ohio, but the courts don't favor them. I think the courts in general feel the same way. The most judges I know in municipal courts, they don't really like them.
Now, when a case, when people are challenging him, are they still have to pay? Is it? I've heard a lot of people just deciding not to pay that completely.
The enforcement mechanism if you get, for example, if you get cited by an officer in person, he hands you a ticket, you have to go to court, or you don't. But if you don't pay that online, that in-person ticket, or you don't show up for your court hearing, there's going to be a warrant put out. Sometimes for your arrest, sometimes just to block your license, a warrant block on your license, which is suspend your license. So it can escalate.
Right.
Now you get driving around with a suspended license. You get pulled over, you get charged with driving under suspension. Now you're getting into jailable offenses. So this whole thing can spiral out of control. With a traffic camera ticket, the pros are there's no points. It's a civil penalty,
Right.
Kind of like a parking ticket, but parking tickets can mess up your record too. But it's just like a civil penalty. There's no points involved. Nothing shows up on your BMV. Your insurance company doesn't find out about it. That's the pros. The cons is what we were talking about earlier. It's kind of a sneak attack. You don't know they're there. They're hiding up on top of a bridge or behind a sign. Or sometimes they're not even manning the camera. Maybe they're across the street with a remote.
Right.
But the enforcement mechanism for that, if you don't go through the normal appeal process and ask for a hearing, you just ignore it and don't pay it, there's really not much they can do. I mean, there's a possibility that they could mess with your credit, maybe put an unpaid bill out there. Personally, I haven't seen much of that. So
Okay.
I can't sit here and tell people what to do.
Right.
Do your research, talk to your own lawyer, which a lot of times is more expensive than just paying $125, right? And that's the way most people look at it. I think they say, well, it's really not that much of a penalty. Yeah, I was probably speeding. I hate paying this thing, but a lot of people just pay it.
Well, and I think in the future, like you are a good tech guy or a big tech guy, the cars are going to have the telemetries that are going to be able to just tell on you when you're speeding, and they won't have to have these stupid things anymore.
And you probably won't even be driving the car.
Right, exactly. It'll be driving. And I'll tell you,
GPS controlled.
I will tell you, since I had put autopilot on, and it has a limitation that it will not go over 5 miles over the speed limit. Like, I don't mess with speed anymore. I just put it in that mode and I just do my thing. And it takes the aggression out of driving. It takes I'm always in a hurry out of driving. It really is a good thing psychologically, I think.
My wife has a friend who has one of the latest and greatest Teslas, with the souped up autopilot feature.
Yeah.
And one of his great pastimes is to get people out on the highway for a ride and just all of a sudden taking his hands off and having people,
flip out.
Yeah, oh my, and the car just, does what it's supposed to do.
It's amazing. It really is cool
phenomenal.
tech.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, I was driving on a road and hit a pothole pretty squarely, and I was calling it into my insurance company, and I was thinking, this whole car knows exactly what frickin' happened. Like, you would not even be able to get away with lying about something that happened because it's got cameras, sensors, and a black box that records everything.
I was going to say, is there some kind of digital recording of the event?
Yeah, for sure. Like, it takes like a month worth of data and sends it up to the cloud right to Tesla, so they know everything that happened.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So when I called in the tire, they had already had parts moving to me for a tire replacement because the car told on me already.
How is the service? That's
it's amazing. It really is. It sucks that it's an hour away to do anything.
Got a Mayfield Road or?
I went to the one in Wexford down in. I'm a little closer to that one, but they do some mobile services where they send out a truck to you, and anything that they can do, like in your driveway, they do, and that helps a little.
I've seen those trucks. Yeah, that's fascinating.
So from a legal perspective on stuff like that, when we get into AI and we get into autonomous vehicles and you have it driving and causing accidents or whatever, you've already had these finger pointings where, the person driving says that the car was driving and the car manufacturer says that it's the driver's responsibility. So like, what starts happening when this stuff starts going?
Wow. That's
future.
I'll be retired by then. Well, as it stands now, you're in there, you're behind the wheel, you're operating, even though you're kind of not, but you are. I mean, the one that put that car in motion, so.
Almost like cruise control. You mean,
right.
You're still responsible.
You're, under Ohio Revised Code, you're operating. So whatever happens during that operations, whatever negligence that is, it's going to go on you. Now, if it was the car's fault, Tesla's fault, I'm the plaintiff. I'm going to sue you first, and I'm going to leave it up to you to take on Tesla. You know what I mean? You can go after the deep pockets.
Right.
But I think as the status quo goes now, I think that's the way it would play out.
Right. Well, I'll give you an example there. You can be going on the freeway called phantom braking, where the sensors will get confused and jam on the brakes at 70 miles an hour. So if that should happen, like what, you stopped in traffic that didn't stop, I mean, that could be bad. I mean, I've caught myself a couple times. I was thankful that there weren't cars around me, but you know,
Yeah, as a general rule, assured clear distance ahead. If you're
so
responsible for slamming into somebody from behind, I'd say 99% of the time you're going to be at fault. The difference in that is if you're doing something as that lead car, very stupid.
right.
maybe you're in reverse, or maybe I had an incident where a wrongful death claim where the mother stopped on an interstate, baby's in the back seat, stopped on the passing lane of the interstate.
Oh, yeah.
Just came to a dead stop. Right, a FedEx truck changed lanes right as she did that and hit her. Now, she was not 100% at fault. He was not 100% at fault. The child died. You know what I mean? And it was tragic. So there was some shared fault there in a situation where she was clearly hit from behind, but it was a situation where, it wasn't your normal assured clear distance ahead, where a rear end collision is automatically 100% fault of the person behind you. Not always.
Yeah. Now, so from the legal standpoint, when we start piping in the rules and regulations, and some of this is probably not binary decisions. When a judge rules on something, could you think artificial intelligence will ever help us make decisions on legal type of things?
Oh, I think that's coming.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to find, as you find less and less human error and very few circumstances of machine error, I think that transcends into less fault, being actionable in the courts. So the machines are taking over,
Conspiracy theorists again. They're going. They are going today.
Call Joe. He'll answer all
With tin foil and Faraday cages all day long. So, let's go to DUI now. I'm sure you see quite a bit of this stuff. Is it possible to bounce back from having a DUI conviction, or does that kind of stick with you for a while?
Wow. I think as a general rule, it sticks with you. Right now, with employers are kind of looking the other way with criminal histories, but most of the time, if you're going to get a company car, if you have a CDL, clearly, commercial driver's license, DUI is very harsh consequences. I think the consequences of a DUI go far beyond what the criminal code anticipated as a punishment. A few days in jail, or the school, so many months of a license suspension, that's what's in the revised code as far as the penalties. And they go up, with multiple offenses. But I don't think anybody anticipated, what that does to you in the employment sector. I mean, sometimes it can affect you getting loans. I mean, if you have multiple offenses, if you get into the felony offense, OVIs, I mean, it's very harsh, even outside of the criminal system. It can affect your employment, no doubt about it.
And the gig economy is like everything is kind of tethered to a car, like Uber and Uber Eats and Grubhub. And so whenever anybody wants to go get one of these gig jobs, they wouldn't pass any kind of. I mean, it's an immediate disqualifier for that stuff,
absolutely,
no matter how long it lasts.
Absolutely, it's just what it does to that company's insurance liability. If they ran your record and saw that on there, and they hired you anyway, and then something happened bad, now they were on notice that they were potentially a bad driver or an impaired driver, and
so prevention is one of those things where.
And I'm a firm believer, and most of the time, I think people make one mistake, they don't make it again.
Right.
I don't get many repeat first-time OVI offenders. But when you do get repeat offenders, they'll repeat more than once.
Right.
And usually there's an addiction problem there that needs to be addressed. Yeah.
Do you see the same thing with like marijuana and those kind of convictions that do the same thing to your likelihood of getting a job and bounce back's a little harder?
If it rises to the level of a felony offense, but with marijuana, at state by state by state, the tolerance level is going up. Many states is straight up legal,
Right?
like Colorado, California,
I think Michigan's even now
Michigan,
too.
right? And Michigan started like Ohio with the medical,
Right.
And then it went to full dispensary, So marijuana, is becoming more and more acceptable out there in the ethos.
Right. What about a dude that's in jail, lost conviction, and now it's legal? I mean, he's going to be pissed that,
Yeah, that's a big problem because, and there's legislation being proposed, especially on the federal level, for marijuana convictions. There's people in federal prison, to automatically give clemency to those folks, and for many of them who have nothing else on their record, give them an automatic seal the record.
It really does.
Just like people that may be convicted of dealing alcohol in the 30s, selling alcohol when it was prohibition. Those people should. I don't know historically whether those people were giving any kind of clemency or an expungement or a sealment, but they should have.
Yeah, I think this decriminalization, and I think warehousing these human lives in jails and prisons is it's a shame, and I think that they should do a better job at letting people bounce back and get back to normal life instead of a lifetime sentence in society.
That's absolutely right. And I think when you have a demand for employment, I think the private sector right now is willing to overlook a lot more criminal convictions than normally they would, because there's such a demand for people post-pandemic. Hopefully in the courts and in the legislatures and in Congress, there's some relief in that regard. I think there should be some kind of provision on the federal level to seal and expunge nonviolent federal convictions. Currently, there's no provision for that. In Ohio, felony 3s on up of certain nonviolent offenses, you can seal as long as you fit the requirements. On the federal level, that doesn't exist yet. It should.
We work with some recovering addicts, and a lot of those guys, when they start putting their life back together, they get a whole lot of history to try to overcome and apologize for and whatever. One of the big things that comes up over and over again is the parole officers who they think are the absolute enemy. Like they are out to get them and they're their problem. And I tell them, like, most of the time that they've embarrassed their parole officer and a lot of goodwill towards them. I mean, is it really that parole officers take the job that way and they're really gunning for addicts? Am I on the right track?
In my experience, especially in Ohio, the adult parole authority is just like everything else. Government in Ohio is understaffed,
right,
and overwhelmed. And I think that a lot of these folks, there's just so much addiction out there. There's so many people. I mean, they could be driving around drug testing all their employees every day, random screening, and the jails would be full of people. I mean, it's there has to be a different approach. There has to be a treatment approach. There has to be an education approach. I don't think most of the parole officers and probation officers I know are out there gunning for people. They're not. They once they have you, they sign you up the first day. They don't want to see you.
They got a stack of U's on their
desk. They don't
right?
want to see you again. I mean, they have so many people.
Right. So, what do you think from a political standpoint with the decriminalization, or what's the biggest need to get some of these people out of prison? So, I mean, you see a lot of the people that are convicted. Like, what do you think the biggest warehousing of people is?
Well, first thing, obviously drugs.
Yeah.
Drug convictions and crimes related to drugs, primarily theft. And even, desperate people do desperate things and, unfortunately commit crimes of violence, which goes beyond just, stealing a purse out of your wife's car or something like that, God forbid, a violence component to that. But 90% of it starts with drugs. It leads to everything else. and usually opioids.
Yeah.
I've been a lawyer for 34, 35 years now. I have never seen anyone commit a violent crime or even a non-violent crime, such as a severe auto accident or something, when they're impaired by marijuana. Usually they're driving 10 miles below the speed limit, being paranoid or whatever the effects of that drug. I mean,
Right.
they're not. Alcohol makes you take risks. Certain narcotics, cocaine and things will want you to push the envelope. And that's where bad things happen. But prison populations are primarily directly related to drugs. I don't like the idea of private prisons. I don't like prison for profit. I think the way the system's designed with private prisons is you're incentivizing these companies to hold people longer because they're getting paid per head, per diem,
Yes.
for that person to be in there. There's a big movement, less government, certain things government has to do. Government has to do military. Government has to do law enforcement. Government has to do the penal system. And it can't be for profit.
If you're deprived of your liberties, it's got, you don't want a for-profit person that makes more money.
Right.
If you're there.
I mean, it's just, next thing you know, these people are getting written up while they're in the private prison more.
Just to keep them there longer.
Yeah. There's, I just, anybody that works for these companies, I'm sure I'm not making them happy, but I mean, that's the way I see it.
Now, if you've been practicing law for quite a bit, and I know in your profession, everybody deserves a defense. But has anybody ever come through your door that you just said, too icky for me, too much?
Usually, yeah, that's happened. Usually, it's a personality problem where they're not listening to me, and maybe I'm not doing a good job listening to them. But as a private defense lawyer, I can choose what I decide to take. As a public defender,
No choice.
They have to take it. And now if they have a conflict, they can get another public defender in that office to take the case. But for the most part, I mean, I can always can pick and choose what I want to take. Once I get on a case, I'd have to ask the judge for permission to withdraw. If a conflict arose later on, or if the person wanted to discharge me because there was a disagreement on how to proceed, that happens.
Now, have you ever served as a public defender? Didn't they require it sometime that everybody did their?
There's a sort of an ethical requirement that lawyers are supposed to do so much pro bono work. I do that all day long. Okay. I answer people's phone. I'm doing it right now.
Exactly.
I mean,
That's exactly.
But I answer people's phone questions over the phone all the time. And a lot of times I'm pointing people to websites where they can do their own legal work. The expungement forms. Most municipal courts, if you have like a minor theft conviction or a disorderly conduct conviction, and most muni courts on their websites have the expungement form. Download the form, fill it out, take it to the court with $50. You don't need me for that.
Right.
So, but pro bono work, we're supposed to do so much. No, I'm not required to serve as a public defender. I have, out of my ethics, stood in for people that were indigent and defended them.
Cool. That's awesome. Forgot the question popped out of my head, so let me reconvene here. Where were we?
We were talking about pro bono defense.
Pro bono work. Anyway, we'll move on from there. All right. Any chat room things that bail me out of this? You have some.
The only chat room we have right now says, just looking at the screen, you can tell who the lawyer is. Chris has very nice shoes on.
Chris?
No, Bob.
I'm Bob. My brother's Chris.
Oh, he's your big brother or little brother?
Big brother.
He's your big brother. Okay.
Yeah, he's the judge in the Niles Municipal Court now. We were partners for 31 years.
You gonna go down that path? You gonna be a judge?
I've kicked it around a few times. I'll never say never, but right now I enjoy being a private practicing lawyer. Business is good. I enjoy helping people in Mahoning Valley. Right now, that's more than satisfying for me.
Okay. Now, as far as like, we do a segment about scam baiting. And so
I've seen that.
Yeah. And, we got warned that, it's probably a dangerous exercise, but, if we illustrate to people what the scam looks like, how it goes down. I mean, have you ever pursued or had anybody pursue the scam originator? I know overseas is tough, but have you taken on any cases where scamming was?
I have never seen that because, like you said, most of the time it's offshore.
Right.
I had one elderly woman client. Her family had been clients of ours for years. I mean, my dad started in that office where I am in 1948, and we've been there ever since. Right. So this family had been with us for years, and she'd be getting up in years. I mean, she still was very much had her wits about her. She knew what was going on, but this person they're very skilled, and convinced her that she had to send $10,000 cash to a P.O. box in Scottsdale, Arizona. And she did that. And unfortunately, she called me the day after she did it. And we contacted the local office of the FBI, and it was all too late. It was FedExed to a P.O. box, and it was gone. And I think it went over the border from there. So
they have these mules that run around and do the collecting. So even if you got that person, rarely are you going to get to the person that's starting the scam.
Nobody that you owe money is going to call you on the phone out of the blue and say, hey, it just doesn't happen that way, as you know. I mean, you're going to get, if it's the IRS, you're going to get a formal letter from the IRS with a phone number on it. And you're going to call that number, and you're going to know it's the IRS over here in Youngstown or Cleveland. Or you're going to get a knock on your door, and there's going to be a badge and an agent standing there if it's a criminal case. So nobody just calls you on the phone, hey, you owe this money, send me money. I mean, that's the way they roll. That's what they do most of the time.
Yeah, and when you hear it after the fact, it was like, well, I'd never fall victim to that. I've been on the phone with these dudes, and they are really good at what they do. Their phraseology, I mean, it's all perfected.
It's almost like they have psychology degrees, right?
Almost.
Yeah, they really,
It's probably dumb luck more than anything else that they're lucking into what works or not. But
I'd be scared to know the percentage of success. I bet you it's fairly high.
Yes, for sure. This one that we did, we kind of knew their strategy, but then once we got into it, they started apologizing and saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry, my family needs food," and blah blah blah. And they went into the empathy scam right following the regular scam. And when I was going through, I was like, "Man, I halfway feel bad for this dude. I almost want to send him some money." I'm like, "Wait a minute, that's the scam right there."
Yeah,
and sniffed
pull
it
it
right
on the
out.
heartstrings.
Yeah, right. But they have no compunction about just jumping into that other scam. So, there's been a ton of shootings after the pandemic side, and people going a little nuts over being cooped up like this. Have you noticed any of that stuff on your end?
Yeah, there's been a lot more fights, reckless driving, road rage kind of things. The pent up demand from the pandemic, I think, it's going to the other. I think there is some of that. I think people are just completely going crazy. We're living in a strange times. I see a lot of economic boom coming our way. I see that. I feel that. But with that comes a lot of things that aren't so great. That's just society. That's just the way it is.
All right. Why don't you let people know how to get a hold of you and if they would ever need your services?
I'm Bob Shaker, Shaker Law Offices. We're in downtown Niles, Ohio, in the tallest building, the skyscraper of Niles. It's the Niles Professional Building. 2 South Main Street, Niles, Ohio. We're on the 5th floor. ShakerLaw.com. Our phone number 330-652-2762. Phone answered 24/7.
There we go. Thank you, Bob, so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure. My pleasure.